Hello and welcome back to Whiskey Wars. My name is Sean, and tonight we're going to be doing the 2021 Buying Guide for Whiskey Drinkers. We got a few categories of whiskey drinkers we're going to be going through tonight, so let's get into it. All right, so our first category, the special occasion buyer. So maybe you have to buy for somebody's wedding or somebody's anniversary, a significant anniversary. Maybe somebody graduated from college. Maybe somebody got a great new job. We could go on and on about what occasions may come up that you're buying whiskey for. And so you're going to buy a different whiskey depending on what the event is, what the person is, what you know about them, how special they are to you in your life, and how big of a deal it actually is. So let's say you're buying for a wedding. Well, then how close is this person to you? That kind of determines how much we're going to spend, how special of a bottle we need to get. But in general, I would say just buy a bottle that has a good age statement on it, because to most people, that's about all they know. They don't really do a whole lot of digging. There's not that many really whiskey guys out there, which is a category we will get to. So most people are just kind of familiar with whiskey. And for most people, a good age statement says this is quality. Here's a good example right here. Henry McKenna 10-year single barrel. This looks like a really, really special bottle. To some people it is. Personally, it's okay. But when people see 10 years old on the bottle, they think, man, this person really got me a great bottle of whiskey. And that's exactly what you want them to think. You want them to think that you got a really special gift for them. So just find something with a nice age statement. And it doesn't have to be bourbon. You could go Scotch. It's much easier actually to get a nice age statement on a Scotch than it is a bourbon. Most Scotches are aged at least 10 years. For instance, this bottle of Ardbeg right here is 10 years old. And many Scotches are much higher than that. So if you want to just impress whoever it is you're buying for, just go for a Scotch that has a nice age statement, and they'll think that you really care about them, even if you don't. Next, we have you're buying for a beginner in whiskey. Now, maybe this person has started on their own, or maybe this is a person you're trying to get into whiskey yourself. Either way, this is a person that has very limited experience with whiskey. And it doesn't really matter much what category they're getting into. The goal is to not scare them off, but also get them to experience quite a few things as soon as you can get them to. So usually what I recommend for any kind of beginner is a variety of whatever category they're getting into. Now, I am primarily a bourbon drinker, but these rules apply to any of the categories of whiskey we're talking about. So get them several different budget options in whatever category they like, so that way they can try them out. And then as they're trying them out and they're telling you what they like and what they don't like, then you can explain to them that these come from certain distilleries and that maybe they will like other things from those distilleries, and that will help them find other things that they enjoy. So that's kind of an easy route to go. And by the way, folks, I do have a beginner's guide to bourbon. So specifically if you're buying for a bourbon lover or someone that's trying to get into bourbon, then I will link that at the end of the video. All right, now we have the opposite of the beginner. This is a person that's been around whiskey for a long time. Maybe they've been drinking whiskey for several decades, but they're stubborn. This is what we call the Old Faithful. An Old Faithful is the person that drinks one kind of whiskey, and that's all they will drink. It might be Jim Beam, it might be Jack Daniels, it might be Wild Turkey 101, or if we're going to Scotch, it might be Johnny Walker Black. It doesn't really matter what the category is. Either way, they're stuck in a rut and they're very comfortable there and they're not getting out anytime soon. So what can you do for this person that doesn't want to change what they drink? Well, figure out what it is they do drink, what it is they love, which they will probably tell you about pretty readily. And then what you can do is get something that's in that same category. For instance, let's say they're a wild turkey lover. Well, then maybe you can get them to venture out just a little bit, still in the Wild Turkey distillery, but instead of just 101, if that's what they always drink, maybe you can get them to up it just a little bit to a Russell's Reserve single barrel, or maybe if they're really adventurous, maybe they can get them into a rare breed. Both of these are excellent bottles of whiskey, but they're a little bit outside of their normal. And then maybe that will expand their horizons a little bit. So a good idea for those that are stuck in a rut. All right, now let's go on to our next category here, the drinking buddy. Now maybe this is a guy or girl that you drink with often. Maybe you've been drinking together for decades, and maybe you have some stories that you've went through together. Well, so maybe you want to buy something that's a little more special, but also it is special to you guys exclusively. So maybe like the first scotch you ever tried, the first bourbon you ever tried together that led to an interesting event in your lives. So maybe they're coming up on a big milestone in their life, and you want to get them something to remind them of your history together. And so you buy them the bottle that reminds them of that crazy night out, or that time you drank a bit too much and ended up on the floor. Whatever the situation is, get them something that's special to you guys. I always think that's a great gift. It shows them that you remember, it shows them that your friendship matters, and it shows them that you care about them. Next on our list is the boss. So it depends on how much you like your boss. If you don't like your boss much, then maybe you don't get them anything. If you like them a little bit, then maybe just get them your kind of run-of-the-mill whiskey. But if this is a boss you care about, or that you're trying to impress, or maybe you're trying to move up the corporate ladder for some reason, that's what you're into. Regardless, if that is the situation, then you need to do a little bit of homework. First off, is this person a whiskey drinker? If they are, then what kind of whiskey do they drink? As we've discussed so far in the video, there's lots of different categories. So you need to know who you're buying for, especially if this is a situation where you're in the kind of environment where the boss has a decanter in his office. If you're at that kind of work environment, then you definitely want to know what's in that decanter, because more than likely, he really enjoys what's in that decanter. That's why it's in his office. That's why it's there. And so you need to know what whiskey is in that. So let's say it's a scotch, but you need to know what category of scotch they enjoy. These are all different categories and they're very different. So you need to know what this person enjoys drinking. And then from there, you can start doing your homework into what might be a good selection. So if it's scotch, get a nice age statement. You're gonna have to go over 10 years. You might have to go with like a Macallan 18 or a Johnny Walker Blue Label. If you're going bourbon, then you need to go with something that's a little bit harder to find. You might want to go with, say, an Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, a Stagg Junior. Either way, what you don't want to do is get your boss something run-of-the-mill if they're a whiskey drinker, because that will tell them that you not only do you know nothing about them, but you don't really care about them much, because if they're a whiskey drinker, they're going to know how much you spent. So if you're going to go whiskey for a gift, then make sure you do your homework. Now, if you can't do all that, but you know they're a whiskey drinker, but they don't have a decanter set, then get them a really nice decanter and glass set. If they're in a situation where they can display that in their office, they will love that. Next is probably the hardest category of whiskey drinker to buy for, and that is the whiskey guy. This guy. All the guys that run whiskey channels on YouTube. We are the hardest to buy for because, let's face it, we're whiskey snobs. We're whiskey aficionados, fanatics, experts in some people's minds, connoisseurs, sommeliers for those out there that call themselves that. Either way, no matter how the whiskey guy in your life describes himself, he's going to be a pain in the butt to buy for. I'm just telling you outright. I know that I would be. So here's the things you don't want to do. Don't buy them run-of-the-mill whiskey. They're going to take it, and they're going to pretend that they are happy that you gave it to them, but they're never going to drink it. If you buy most whiskey guys Jim Beam or Jack Daniels, they'll take it, and it will sit wherever their whiskey room is until they give it away to guests. They will never drink a drop of it, more than likely. So what can you do for this kind of a person? Well, if you don't have the time to do the homework into what they may or may not have, there's two routes that you can go. Gift cards to, say, Total Wine, Liquor Barn, whatever the big liquor store is near you, or you can go with a distillery-only release. Now, this is a little bit harder route, but more than likely they will not have it. Now, depending on the state you live in, there's probably distilleries nearby. So you're going to want to go there and find something at the distillery that only the distillery is offering at that location. Bardstown Bourbon Company, for instance, is great about this. They almost always have a distillery-only selection available. And speaking from personal experience on this right here is a Bardstown Bourbon Company distillery-only release. This is the Pfeiffer Pavitt XO. And I absolutely love this bottle. My son bought this for me when they were up here. And this is one of my favorite bourbons, not just because my son bought it, but also it's a great bottle of bourbon. And I know that not everybody loves finished bourbons, but this is great. And we're gonna have to pause for me to take a sip here. This bourbon is an experience and a half, and even a whiskey lover is going to not turn their nose up at something like this. But as I said, it will require a little bit of going out of your way to get something like this. All right, next is the mixer. Now, the mixer is the person in your life that maybe they drink whiskey, but they will only drink whiskey mixed with something else. Might be Coke, might be ginger ale, might be old fashioned, might be whiskey sours. The list is infinite, what they could be mixing it with, but nonetheless, they're always mixing. They never drink whiskey neat. Now, if they're really adamant about never drinking whiskey neat, and there are people like that, then what can we do for them? Well, one thing we can do for them is get them a very nice set for mixing. You know, you got your shaker, your stirrer, some really nice glasses, high quality rocks glasses. Maybe get them something to make really good ice in. But if we're trying to break them out of that habit of mixing only, then look into something that maybe their palate can handle that they can drink neat. And for this, I always go to the sweeter option, but also have some complexity so that way they're not bored with it. Because if they're used to mixing, they're used to a lot of sweet flavors. So there's a few options here. And here's a couple that I usually suggest. Woodford Double Oak and Old Forester 1910. Both of these have really full-bodied profiles, but they're also not so off-putting on the proof. There's not a ton of spice. And I've introduced this to several people that are new to drinking whiskey neat, and they love both of them. It's hard for me to see a person that could drink this and think that they're disgusting or off-putting because they're so sweet, they're so velvety on the palate, both really enjoyable. I think of the two that the 1910 is the superior choice. But if you don't want to go with something that's double oaked, then my next choice would probably be Long Branch from Wild Turkey. And again, this has some nice complexity, but it is lower proof. So I don't think that would scare off a person that's new to drinking whiskey neat. So those are my suggestions for your mixer friends. All right, the tater. This is a dreaded group to be in, and let's talk about it for a little bit first. What is a tater? Now, people define this differently, and I think it's a word that gets used probably too often, and I don't know how helpful it is in the whiskey community. For one, tater is a little bit ambiguous. People use it for different things all the time. When I think of a tater, though, I think of a person that is new to whiskey or new-ish. They've seen on forums that Buffalo Trace stuff is just the absolute best whiskey in the world and that nothing else even comes close. Well, the problem with that kind of thinking is it's absolutely wrong. There's so many great bourbons that are on the shelves all the time. So what we want to do with our friends that say they collect Blantons or they just absolutely have to have Eagle Rare. Well, what can we do to help them so that they can open up their minds to other options in the bourbon world? Because that's really the goal. We don't want to exclude them from the bourbon community, and we don't want to berate them endlessly because that's not really helpful. But instead, let's help them expand their experience in whatever category of whiskey we're talking about. And it's usually bourbon, let's be fair. Well, let's say they love Blanton's. Well, then how about a Henry McKenna single barrel or a 1792 single barrel? Or how about the Old Forester single barrel? Now, all those are hard to find. I would say they're less hard to find than Blanton's, usually, but not always. But if you want something that's easier to find, although completely different, but absolutely amazing, then I always suggest Russell's Reserve Single Barrel in the single barrel category because I think it's fantastic. If you want an easy to find option that's lower proof in the single barrel category, then how about Evan Williams Single Barrel? The whole point, though, is let's get our friends to expand their horizons and try new things. I hope this list has been helpful. I hope that you find all the gifts for all the people you need to find gifts for. And more than anything, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, then hit that like button down below. If you want to see more reviews from me, then you can click right here. And if you want to really support the channel, then you can subscribe right here. And until next time, folks, just remember, you can never have too much good whiskey.